Tracy Bennett stood at the window of her small apartment, watching the medical helicopter fly overhead. Its red and white colors caught the morning sun as it moved quickly across the blue sky. She felt the familiar tightness in her chest. Her hands began to shake slightly. She stepped back from the window and closed her eyes, taking 3 deep breaths like her therapist had taught her. It had been 3 years since the accident. 3 years since she had been the one flying that helicopter. 3 years since everything changed. Tracy was 50 years old now, but she felt much older sometimes. Her short brown hair was starting to show more gray, and the lines around her green eyes had become deeper. She had been a nurse pilot for 15 years before the accident. It was a job she had loved more than anything else in the world. The day had started like any normal day. Tracy had arrived at the air ambulance base at 6 in the morning. Her partner that day was a young paramedic named James. He was new to the team, only 3 months into the job, but he was eager and careful. Tracy liked working with him. "Morning, Tracy," James had said, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the nearby cafe. "I got your usual. Black, no sugar." "You're a lifesaver," Tracy had replied, taking the hot cup gratefully. It was early March, and the morning air was still cold. They had done their usual checks on the helicopter. Everything seemed perfect. The weather report showed clear skies for most of the day, with some clouds expected in the afternoon. Nothing unusual, nothing to worry about. The call came at 10:30. A man in his 30s had suffered a heart attack while hiking in the mountains about 60 miles away. The ground ambulance couldn't reach him quickly because of the rough terrain. They needed the air ambulance. Tracy and James were in the air within 5 minutes. The helicopter flew smoothly through the clear morning sky. Tracy had flown this route many times before. She knew every mountain, every valley, every landmark below. "ETA 15 minutes, Tracy said into her radio. "Patient status?" "Critical," came the response. "Chest pain, difficulty breathing. Ground team has stabilized him, but he needs to get to the hospital fast." Tracy increased their speed slightly. Every minute counted in cases like this. She had learned that lesson many times over her 15 years of flying. Sometimes a few minutes made the difference between life and death. They found the hiking trail easily. The ground team had laid out orange markers to show them where to land. Tracy brought the helicopter down smoothly in a small clearing. James jumped out before the rotors had fully stopped, his medical bag in hand. The patient was a man named David Miller. He was 34 years old, married with 2 young children. He had been hiking with friends when he suddenly felt terrible pain in his chest. His friends had called for help immediately. "Blood pressure is low," James reported as he worked. "Heart rate irregular. We need to move now." They got David onto the stretcher and into the helicopter. Tracy could see the fear in his eyes. She had seen that look many times before. She gave him what she hoped was a reassuring smile. "You're in good hands," she told him. "We'll have you at the hospital in no time." She started the helicopter and lifted off. The flight to the hospital should take about 20 minutes. 20 minutes. She had done this hundreds of times. But then the weather changed. The clouds that were supposed to arrive in the afternoon came early. Within minutes, thick gray clouds surrounded the helicopter. Visibility dropped dramatically. Tracy felt her stomach tighten, but she stayed calm. She had flown in bad weather before. She knew what to do. "Switching to instruments," she announced, focusing on her navigation screens. Behind her, she could hear James working on David. The monitors showed that David's condition was getting worse. "Tracy, we need to hurry," James said, his voice tense. "His heart rate is dropping." "I'm going as fast as I can," Tracy replied. She was flying at the maximum safe speed for these conditions. The clouds got thicker. Rain started to hit the windscreen. Tracy's hands gripped the controls tightly. She could feel the helicopter being pushed by wind gusts. Every instinct she had was screaming at her to go faster, but she knew that would be dangerous. Come on," she whispered to herself.
15 minutes into the flight, James called out, He's going into cardiac arrest. Tracy's heart raced. She needed to get David to the hospital now, but the weather was so bad. The visibility was almost zero. How far? James asked desperately as he started CPR. 8 minutes, Tracy said. Maybe less. She pushed the helicopter harder, flying as fast as she dared through the storm. The rain was so heavy now that she could barely see anything. She was flying almost entirely on instruments, trusting her training and experience. 7 minutes. 6 minutes. I've got a pulse, James shouted. But it's weak. Very weak. 5 minutes. Tracy could see the lights of the city ahead through breaks in the clouds. They were close. So close. 4 minutes. Losing him again. James's voice was filled with panic. Tracy's hands were shaking on the controls, but she kept flying. The hospital was just ahead. She could see the landing pad. 3 minutes. The helicopter broke through the final layer of clouds. The hospital was right there, its helipad lit up and ready. Tracy had never been so relieved to see anything in her life. 2 minutes. She brought the helicopter down, landing with a slight bump. The hospital team was already running toward them with a gurney. 1 minute. They got David out of the helicopter. James jumped out after them, still doing CPR as they rushed toward the emergency room. Tracy sat in the pilot's seat, her whole body shaking. She turned off the engine and sat in silence. The rain pounded on the windscreen. She closed her eyes and tried to calm her breathing. 20 minutes later, James came back to the helicopter. His face told Tracy everything she needed to know before he even spoke. "We lost him," James said quietly. "They tried everything, but his heart was too damaged. The doctors said even if we'd gotten him there 5 minutes earlier, it probably wouldn't have made a difference. But maybe it would have." That was what Tracy heard in his voice. That was what she was thinking too. David Miller died on the operating table, leaving behind a wife and 2 children aged 6 and 8. Tracy had gotten him to the hospital, but not fast enough. Not fast enough to save him. That night, Tracy couldn't sleep. She kept replaying the flight in her mind. Could she have gone faster? Should she have taken a different route? Had she made the wrong decision somewhere? The investigation that followed cleared Tracy of any wrongdoing. The weather had been unpredictable. She had made all the right decisions. She had followed all the protocols. The doctors confirmed that David's heart attack was so severe that he probably would have died anyway, no matter how quickly they got him to the hospital. But Tracy couldn't forgive herself. She started having nightmares. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw David's face. She heard James saying, "Losing him," over and over again. She felt the rain on the windscreen and the panic in her chest. She tried to keep working. She went back to flying after 2 weeks off. But the first time she got into the helicopter after the accident, she had a panic attack. Her hands shook so badly she couldn't hold the controls. Her breathing became rapid and shallow. She had to get out of the helicopter and sit on the ground until she could breathe normally again. Her supervisor, a kind man named Robert, sat with her that day. "Tracy," he said gently, "maybe you need more time." "I can do this," Tracy insisted. "I just need to get back into it." But she couldn't. Every time she tried to fly, the panic came back. The fear was overwhelming. She couldn't focus. She couldn't think clearly. All she could see was the storm. All she could hear was James's desperate voice. All she could feel was the crushing guilt. After 3 more attempts, Tracy accepted the truth. She couldn't fly anymore. The trauma was too deep. Her body and mind simply would not let her get into a helicopter. She went to see a psychologist who specialized in trauma. Dr. Sarah Chen was a calm, understanding woman in her 40s who had worked with many emergency service workers. What you're experiencing is called post-traumatic stress disorder, Dr. Chen explained during their first session. It's very common in people who work in high-stress emergency situations, especially after a traumatic event. But I didn't do anything wrong, Tracy said, her voice breaking. The investigation said so. Everyone said so. So why do I feel like this? Because trauma isn't logical, Dr. Chen replied. Your mind and body experienced something terrifying, and now they're trying to protect you from experiencing it again. Unfortunately, that protection is preventing you from doing your job. Tracy started therapy, meeting with Dr. Chen twice a week. They worked through her feelings about the accident. They talked about David Miller and his family. They discussed guilt and responsibility and the limitations of human control. But even with therapy, Tracy knew she couldn't go back to flying. The fear was too strong. After 6 months of trying, she made the hardest decision of her life. She resigned from the air ambulance service. It felt like losing a part of herself. Flying had been her identity for so many years. Being a nurse pilot had given her purpose and pride. Now she felt lost and empty. For a year after leaving her job, Tracy didn't do much of anything. She lived off her savings and spent most of her time in her apartment. She continued her therapy sessions, which helped, but she felt like she was just existing, not living. Her friends tried to help. Her family worried about her. Her mother called her every few days. Tracy, honey, you need to do something, her mother said during one call. You can't just sit at home forever. You're still young. You're only 47. You have so much life ahead of you. I know, Mom, Tracy replied. I don't know what to do anymore. Well, you need to figure it out, her mother said firmly but kindly. David Miller's death was a tragedy, but you can't let it destroy your life too. You're still here. You still have the ability to help people. You just need to find a new way. Her mother's words stuck with Tracy. She was still here. She was still capable. She just needed to find a new path. After talking with Dr. Chen, Tracy decided to look for a job that was completely different from her old life. She needed something that wouldn't trigger her trauma, something calm and routine, something that didn't involve life or death decisions. She found an advertisement for a city bus driver position in Riverside, a small town about 30 miles from where she had worked as a nurse pilot. The job seemed perfect. It was simple, straightforward, and predictable. Drive the same routes every day. Pick up passengers. Drop them off. No emergencies. No storms. No one dying in the back of her vehicle. Tracy applied and got the job. The training was easy for someone who had flown helicopters. Driving a bus was simple in comparison. She passed all her tests and got her commercial driver's license. 2 years after leaving the air ambulance service, Tracy started her new life as a bus driver in Riverside. Riverside was a pleasant town of about 20,000 people. It sat in a valley surrounded by green hills and mountains. The town had a small downtown area with local shops, a few restaurants, a library, and a community center. Most people knew each other, at least by sight. Tracy found a small apartment on the edge of town. It had 1 bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a living room with a large window that looked out over the hills. It wasn't fancy, but it was comfortable and quiet. That was all she needed. Her job as a bus driver was exactly what she had hoped for. The Riverside bus system had only 3 routes, all running through town and the nearby neighborhoods. Tracy usually drove Route 2, which went from the downtown area out to the residential neighborhoods on the east side of town. Her day started early. She had to be at the bus depot by 5:30 in the morning to check her bus and prepare for the first run at 6 o'clock. The first passengers were usually workers heading to early shifts at the local factory or the hospital. Then came students going to school. By 9 o'clock, the passengers were mostly elderly people going shopping or to doctor's appointments. Tracy got to know her regular passengers over time. There was Mrs. Patterson, an elderly lady who took the bus every Tuesday and Thursday to visit her sister at the nursing home. There was young Tommy, a teenager who rode the bus to school every morning and always said, "Thanks, Miss Tracy," when he got off. There was Mr. Kowalski, a retired teacher who used the bus to get to the library 3 times a week. "Good morning, Tracy," they would call as they boarded. "Good morning," Tracy would reply with a smile. It was a simple life, but Tracy found peace in its simplicity. There was something comforting about the routine. Same routes, same stops, same familiar faces. Nothing unexpected, nothing dangerous, nothing to trigger her anxiety. In the evenings, Tracy would return to her apartment, make a simple dinner, and spend time reading or watching television. On weekends, she went for walks in the hills around town. The exercise was good for her, and the quiet beauty of nature helped calm her mind. She still saw Dr. Chen for therapy, though now it was only once a month instead of twice a week. They talked about Tracy's progress and how she was adjusting to her new life. "How are you feeling about the change?" Dr. Chen asked during one session. "Better," Tracy said. "I mean, I still have bad days. I still have the nightmares sometimes, but they're less frequent now. And my new job, it's helping. It's giving me a purpose again without the stress." "That's good progress," Dr. Chen said. "But I want to ask you something. Do you miss nursing? Do you miss helping people in that immediate life-saving way?" Tracy was quiet for a moment. "Yes," she finally admitted. "Sometimes I see an ambulance go by, and I feel this pull, like a part of me still wants to be out there, helping. But I know I can't. I can't go back to that." "Maybe you don't have to go back to exactly what you did before," Dr. Chen suggested. "There are other ways to help people, other ways to use your medical knowledge and experience." "Like what?" "That's something for you to think about," Dr. Chen said with a small smile. Tracy did think about it. She thought about it a lot, but she wasn't ready yet. The trauma was still too fresh, even after 2 years. She needed more time to heal. For now, driving the bus was enough. Her coworkers at the bus depot were friendly. There were 6 other drivers, plus the depot manager, a man named Frank who had been running the Riverside bus system for 20 years. "You're doing a great job, Tracy," Frank told her after her first month. "Passengers like you, you're punctual, careful, and polite. We're lucky to have you." "Thank you," Tracy said. "I'm happy here." And she was. It wasn't the exciting, fulfilling career she'd had before, but it was good enough. It was safe. It was manageable. It was a life she could handle. Tracy made one friend among her coworkers. Her name was Maria, a woman about Tracy's age who had been driving buses in Riverside for 5 years. Maria was warm and chatty, always ready with a joke or a funny story. One day during lunch break, Maria asked Tracy about her life before Riverside. "So, what did you do before this?" Maria asked, biting into her sandwich. "You don't strike me as someone who always wanted to be a bus driver." "No offense." "None taken," Tracy said. She hesitated, then decided to tell Maria at least part of the truth. "I was a nurse. I worked in emergency medicine." "Really? That's impressive. So, why the change?" Tracy looked down at her coffee cup. "I had a bad experience. Lost a patient. It affected me pretty badly. I needed to do something different." Maria nodded sympathetically. "I get it. My sister was a nurse too. She saw some tough things. It's a hard job. But hey, you're helping people here too, you know? Getting them where they need to go safely. That matters." "Thanks, Maria." Tracy said, feeling grateful for the understanding. As the months passed, Tracy settled more deeply into her new routine. Spring turned to summer, summer to fall, fall to winter. The seasons changed, but her life stayed the same. Wake up early, drive the bus, go home, rest, repeat. She started volunteering at the local library on Saturday mornings, helping with the children's reading program. It was nice to do something different on the weekends. The children were sweet and enthusiastic. Reading to them gave Tracy a sense of purpose beyond just driving the bus. One of the children, a little girl named Emma, who was about 7 years old, reminded Tracy of David Miller's daughter. Tracy had seen photos of David's family after the accident. His daughter had been about the same age then as Emma was now. The first time Tracy saw Emma at the library, she felt a wave of sadness wash over her. But she pushed through it. She read the story with enthusiasm, making different voices for different characters. Emma laughed and clapped her hands. After the reading session, Emma's mother came to pick her up. "Thank you so much for doing this," Emma's mother said. "Emma loves coming here. She talks about story time all week." "It's my pleasure," Tracy said, and she meant it. Slowly, very slowly, Tracy was rebuilding herself. She was creating a new identity, a new purpose. She would never be the person she was before the accident. That Tracy was gone. But this new Tracy was learning to be okay. Learning to accept what had happened. Learning to forgive herself, even if she couldn't forget. Dr. Chen noticed the change. "You seem more at peace," she observed during one of their sessions. "I think I am," Tracy replied. "I still have moments where I feel the guilt, where I wonder if I could have done something different. But I'm learning to live with it. I'm learning that I'm not perfect, that I can't control everything, and that sometimes bad things happen even when we do our best." "That's a huge step forward," Dr. Chen said. "You should be proud of yourself." Tracy was proud. She had come a long way from the broken, terrified person she had been 3 years ago. She had found a way to survive. She had found a way to live. But life has a way of testing us when we least expect it. Tracy's quiet, peaceful life was about to be interrupted in a way she could never have imagined.
It was a Tuesday in October, 2 years after Tracy had started working as a bus driver. The fall colors were beautiful that year. The hills around Riverside were painted in shades of red, orange, and gold. The air was cool and crisp, perfect weather for Tracy's weekend walks. Tracy's route that day was slightly different from usual. Frank had asked her to cover the Route 3 run because the regular driver was sick. Route 3 went through town and then up into the hills on the western side, serving the small communities that lived there. "It's pretty straightforward," Frank told her that morning. "Just follow the normal route signs. The roads are a bit winding up in the hills, but nothing you can't handle. You've driven plenty of mountain roads before, right?" "Yes," Tracy said. More than he knew. She had flown over those mountains hundreds of times. "Good. Just take it easy on the turns. Some of them are sharper than they look." Tracy started her day as usual. The morning runs were smooth and uneventful. She picked up her passengers, dropped them off, and moved on to the next stop. By early afternoon, she was ready for her final run of the day up into the hills. She had 23 passengers on the bus. Most were elderly residents from the hill communities who had been shopping in town. There were also a few younger people, including a mother with a baby, 2 teenage boys, and a man in his 60s who was reading a newspaper. Tracy pulled out of the downtown station and began the drive up the mountain road. The road curved back and forth as it climbed, following the natural contours of the hillside. On one side was the rocky face of the mountain. On the other side was a steep drop down into the valley below. Tracy drove carefully, taking the turns at a safe speed. The bus was large and heavy, and she needed to be cautious on these winding roads. She had driven this route a few times before when covering for other drivers, so she knew the road reasonably well. Behind her, the passengers chatted quietly or looked out the windows at the beautiful fall scenery. Mrs. Henderson, one of the regular passengers Tracy had come to know over the past few weeks, was sitting near the front. "Lovely day, isn't it, Tracy?" Mrs. Henderson said. "It certainly is," Tracy replied with a smile. They were about 15 minutes into the climb when Tracy saw something in her mirrors that made her heart skip a beat. A large delivery truck was coming down the mountain behind her, moving fast. Too fast for these winding roads, much too fast. Tracy frowned and kept her eyes on the mirror. The truck was getting closer. She could see the driver in the cab. He looked panicked, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. The truck was swinging wide on the turns, barely staying on the road. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Tracy's pulse began to race. Her old emergency training kicked in, and she started assessing the situation rapidly. The truck was out of control. It was gaining speed as it came down the hill. The driver seemed to be trying to slow down but couldn't. Brake failure, Tracy thought. The truck's brakes must have failed. She pressed slightly harder on her own brakes, trying to maintain control while keeping her distance from the runaway truck. Her mind raced through possibilities. Where was the nearest turnoff? Where could the truck driver go to stop safely? But there was nowhere. This section of the road had no turnoffs, no emergency ramps, nothing but curves and steep drops. The truck was getting closer. Tracy could hear the roar of its engine now. The driver was leaning on his horn, warning everyone to get out of the way. "Hold on!" Tracy called out to her passengers. Some of them were starting to notice the truck behind them and were looking concerned. Tracy accelerated slightly, trying to stay ahead of the truck. But her bus was heavy and slow on the uphill climb. The truck was much faster, pulled by gravity down the mountain. She rounded another curve, her hands steady on the wheel despite the adrenaline pumping through her veins. She could see a slightly wider section of road ahead. Maybe she could pull over there and let the truck pass. Maybe the driver could get past them and find a way to stop farther down the mountain. But they didn't make it to the wider section.
The truck came around the curve behind them too fast. The driver tried to steer, tried to control the massive vehicle, but he couldn't. The truck swung wide on the turn, it crossed into the wrong lane, and then it hit them. The impact was massive and terrifying. The truck slammed into the left rear side of the bus with a sound like thunder. Tracy felt the bus lift off the ground on one side. She heard screams from her passengers. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion and all at once. The bus was pushed sideways. Tracy fought the steering wheel, trying to keep the bus on the road, but it was impossible. The force was too great. The bus tilted, tilted, tilted. And then it went over. The bus rolled onto its side and slid off the road, falling down the embankment. It rolled once, twice, 3 times. Tracy held onto the steering wheel with all her strength. The world spun around her in a chaos of breaking glass, screaming metal, and terrified voices. Finally, with one last jarring impact, the bus came to rest on its side at the bottom of a small slope about 20 feet below the road. For a moment, there was silence. Then the sounds started. Crying, moaning, someone calling for help, the hiss of escaping air or steam. Tracy was hanging in her seatbelt, the bus lying on its right side. Her head hurt, her shoulder hurt, everything hurt. But she was alive, she was conscious, and her passengers needed help. Tracy's training took over immediately. All the fear, all the anxiety, all the trauma from 3 years ago vanished. In this moment, she was a medical professional again. She was a nurse. People were hurt, and she knew exactly what to do. "Everyone stay calm," she called out, her voice strong and clear despite the pain. "Don't move unless you have to. I'm going to check on everyone." She unbuckled her seatbelt and dropped down onto what was now the floor of the bus, the right side windows. Shattered glass crunched under her feet. She could smell gasoline and knew they needed to get out of the bus quickly, if there was a fire. But first, she needed to assess the injuries. That was the rule in any mass casualty incident. Assess first, then act. Tracy moved through the bus carefully but quickly. The passengers were scattered throughout the vehicle, some still in their seats, some thrown to the floor, some trapped under fallen luggage or broken seats. "Mrs. Henderson," Tracy called, finding the elderly woman near the front. Mrs. Henderson had a cut on her forehead and looked dazed, but she was conscious. "I'm okay," Mrs. Henderson said weakly. "I think." "My arm hurts." "Don't move it," Tracy instructed. "Just stay still. I'll come back to you." Tracy moved deeper into the bus. The teenage boys were near the middle, both conscious, but one had blood running down his face from a scalp wound. The mother with the baby was near the back, crying and holding her infant tightly. The baby was screaming, which was actually a good sign. It meant the baby could breathe. "Is your baby hurt?" Tracy asked. "I don't know," the mother sobbed. "I don't know." "Let me see," Tracy said gently. She quickly examined the baby. No obvious injuries. Still crying loudly, moving all limbs. "I think your baby is okay, just scared. Hold her close and stay where you are." As Tracy continued her assessment, she mentally categorized the injuries using the triage system she had learned years ago: red for critical, yellow for serious, green for minor. She had several yellows and a lot of greens, but thankfully no reds yet. Until she found Mr. Garcia. Mr. Garcia was a man in his late 50s who often rode the bus. He was trapped under a fallen seat, and there was a lot of blood. Tracy knelt beside him and quickly checked his vital signs. Weak pulse, rapid breathing, pale skin. He was going into shock. "Mr. Garcia, can you hear me?" Tracy asked. "Hurts," he gasped. "Can't breathe." Tracy quickly examined him. There was a deep gash in his leg, bleeding heavily. He might also have internal injuries from the crushing weight of the seat. "I'm going to help you," Tracy said firmly. "Just stay with me." She tore a strip of cloth from her own shirt and wrapped it tightly around Mr. Garcia's leg, above the wound, creating a makeshift tourniquet. The bleeding slowed immediately. "Good." "Someone help me lift this seat," Tracy called out. Two of the passengers who were less injured came to help. Together, they lifted the broken seat off Mr. Garcia. He cried out in pain, but managed to stay conscious. Tracy continued moving through the bus, helping where she could, offering comfort and first aid with whatever materials she could find. She used pieces of clothing as bandages. She kept people from moving if they might have spinal injuries. She talked calmly and reassuringly to everyone, keeping them from panicking. One of the teenage boys was named Mike. He had stopped bleeding from his head wound and was actually quite calm. "Are you a doctor?" Mike asked Tracy as she checked a woman's arm. "I'm a nurse," Tracy said. "Well, I was. I don't practice anymore." "You seem like you know what you're doing," Mike said. "Muscle memory," Tracy replied with a slight smile. And it was true. Despite not having practiced emergency medicine in 3 years, her body remembered. Her mind remembered. All those years of training and experience were coming back to her in this critical moment. After she had checked every passenger and provided what first aid she could, Tracy realized something important. She had been inside the crashed bus for about 10 minutes, helping people, dealing with injuries, managing the situation. And she hadn't had a panic attack. She hadn't frozen up. She hadn't been overwhelmed by fear or anxiety. She was doing what she had been trained to do, what she was good at. And it felt right. Tracy climbed carefully toward the front of the bus where the door was. The door was jammed, lying sideways against the ground. She tried to force it open but couldn't. "Can anyone hear me out there?" she shouted through the broken windshield. "We need help! We have injured people." She heard voices from above, on the road. Other drivers had stopped. People were calling down to them. "Help is coming!" someone shouted. "The police and ambulance are on the way." "How long?" Tracy called back. "Maybe 10 or 15 minutes. Are people hurt badly?" "Yes. We need medical assistance fast." Tracy climbed back into the bus. 15 minutes. That was a long time for some of these injuries. Mr. Garcia was still in shock. A woman named Lisa had possible broken ribs and was having difficulty breathing. Mrs. Henderson's arm was bent at an odd angle and was probably broken. Tracy had to keep everyone stable until the real help arrived. She went back to Mr. Garcia. His pulse was still weak but steady. She elevated his legs to help with the shock and kept pressure on his wound. "You're doing great, Mr. Garcia," she said. "Stay with me. Help is almost here." "My wife," he whispered. "Tell my wife." "You're going to tell her yourself," Tracy said firmly. "You're going to be fine." She moved to Lisa next. The woman was breathing in short, painful gasps. "Try to breathe slowly," Tracy instructed. "Small breaths. Don't try to take deep breaths if it hurts too much." "I'm scared," Lisa whispered. "I know," Tracy said gently, holding her hand. "But you're going to be okay. I promise you, you're going to be okay." And as Tracy said those words, she felt something shift inside her. She had said similar words to patients hundreds of times during her career. But this time, saying them while trapped in a crashed bus, surrounded by injured people, she truly believed them. Not because she could guarantee the outcome, she couldn't, but because she knew she had done everything she could. She was doing everything she could. And sometimes that had to be enough. The 15 minutes felt like hours. Tracy moved constantly, checking on everyone, adjusting bandages, offering comfort and reassurance. She kept talking to keep people calm and to keep them from going into shock. "What's your name?" she asked a young woman who was crying softly. "Melissa," the woman replied. "Where do you live, Melissa?" "Up on Hillcrest Road." "That's a beautiful area. Do you like living up there?" And they talked about houses and neighbors and the view from the hills, about anything except the crash and the pain and the fear. Tracy knew that keeping people talking, keeping them focused on normal things, helped prevent psychological shock. Finally, after what felt like forever, Tracy heard sirens. The ambulances were arriving. "They're here," she called out to her passengers. "Help is here." Paramedics appeared at the broken windshield and the emergency exits. They began carefully extracting passengers from the bus. Tracy worked with them, providing information about each patient's injuries and what first aid she had already provided. "This man has a leg wound with a tourniquet," Tracy told the first paramedic who climbed into the bus. "He's been in shock for about 12 minutes. This woman has possible broken ribs and difficulty breathing. That elderly lady has a possible broken arm." The paramedic looked at Tracy with surprise. "Are you medical personnel?" "I was a nurse," Tracy said. "Long time ago." "Well, you probably saved some lives today," the paramedic said. "Good work." It took another 20 minutes to get everyone out of the bus. Mr. Garcia was loaded into the first ambulance and rushed to the hospital. Lisa, Mrs. Henderson, and several others followed in additional ambulances. Tracy was the last one to leave the bus. A paramedic insisted on checking her injuries. She had bruises, a possible mild concussion, and a badly bruised shoulder, but nothing serious. "You should go to the hospital too," the paramedic said. "Get checked out properly." "I will," Tracy promised. As Tracy was helped up the embankment to the road, she saw the full extent of the accident for the first time. Her bus was a twisted wreck at the bottom of the slope. The delivery truck that had hit them was stopped farther down the road, its front end smashed. She could see the truck driver sitting on the ground, his head in his hands. He looked shaken, but not seriously injured. Police officers were everywhere, taking photos, measuring skid marks, talking to witnesses. A fire truck was standing by in case of fire. News crews were starting to arrive. One of the police officers approached Tracy. "Are you the bus driver?" "Yes," Tracy said. "Tracy Bennett." "I'm Officer Williams. I know you've been through a lot, but I need to get your statement about what happened." Tracy told him everything: the runaway truck, the collision, the bus going over the embankment, and the aftermath. Officer Williams listened carefully, taking notes. "And you provided first aid to the passengers?" he asked. "Yes. I'm a trained nurse. Well, I was. I don't practice anymore, but I did what I could." "You did more than just what you could," Officer Williams said. "I've been talking to your passengers. They all say you were incredible. Calm, professional, caring. You kept them from panicking. You treated their injuries. One man said you probably saved his life." Tracy felt tears suddenly prick her eyes. She hadn't cried yet, hadn't allowed herself to feel the emotions. But now, hearing those words, the feelings started to come. "I just did what needed to be done," she said quietly. "That's what heroes do," Officer Williams replied with a kind smile. Tracy spent the night in the hospital. The doctors wanted to monitor her for concussion symptoms and make sure she didn't have any internal injuries. She had bruises all over her body, and her shoulder was very painful, but otherwise she was remarkably unhurt. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the truck coming down the mountain. She felt the impact. She heard the screaming. But strangely, she didn't feel the same kind of panic she had felt after David Miller's death. This was different. This time she had been able to help. This time everyone had survived. The next morning, Dr. Patel came to check on her. "How are you feeling, Ms. Bennett?" he asked. "Sore," Tracy admitted. "But okay." "We've heard remarkable things about what you did yesterday," Dr. Patel said. "Several of the other patients from the crash have told us how you helped them. Apparently, you saved at least 2 lives with your quick actions." "I just did what I was trained to do," Tracy said. "Well, your training served you well. Mr. Garcia, the man with the leg injury, would have bled out if you hadn't applied that tourniquet. And Lisa Chen, the woman with the broken ribs, might have developed a collapsed lung if you hadn't positioned her correctly and monitored her breathing. You should be very proud of yourself." After Dr. Patel left, a nurse came in with breakfast. "You're famous, you know," the nurse said with a smile. "It's all over the news. Bus driver saves passengers after crash. They're calling you a hero." Tracy hadn't thought about the news. She turned on the television in her room and found a local news channel. Sure enough, there was coverage of the accident. She saw aerial footage of the crash site, the bus lying on its side down the embankment. She saw interviews with some of her passengers. Mrs. Henderson appeared on screen, her arm in a sling. "She was amazing," Mrs. Henderson told the reporter. "So calm and capable. She went to each of us, checked our injuries, and made sure we were okay. She kept us all from panicking. I don't know what would have happened without her." The mother with the baby was interviewed next. "She checked my daughter so carefully and gently. She told me my baby was going to be okay. And then she went to help everyone else, even though she must have been hurt too. She's a hero. A real hero." Tracy turned off the television. She didn't feel like a hero. She felt like someone who had simply done what was necessary. But as she lay in the hospital bed, thinking about the day before, she realized something important. For the first time in 3 years, she had faced a medical emergency without freezing up. without having a panic attack, without being overwhelmed by fear and guilt. She had acted on instinct and training, and she had helped people. People had survived because of what she did. Maybe Dr. Chen had been right. Maybe she didn't need to give up helping people entirely. Maybe she just needed to find a different way to do it. Tracy was released from the hospital that afternoon. Maria came to pick her up. "Oh my God, Tracy," Maria said, hugging her carefully to avoid the bruises. "I was so worried when I heard about the crash." "But then everyone said you were amazing, that you saved people's lives." "I just did what needed to be done," Tracy said, repeating the phrase she had said so many times already. "That's exactly what makes you amazing," Maria replied. Frank, the depot manager, called Tracy that evening. "Take as much time off as you need," he said. "There's no rush to come back. The important thing is that you're okay." "Thank you," Tracy said. "I'll need a few days, I think." "Take weeks if you need them." "And Tracy, I heard what you did. That was incredible. I'm proud to have you on my team." Over the next few days, Tracy received dozens of phone calls and messages. Her passengers from the crash wanted to thank her. Her old colleagues from the air ambulance service called to congratulate her. The mayor of Riverside sent a letter commending her actions. A local newspaper wanted to interview her. Tracy agreed to do one interview with the local Riverside Herald. The reporter, a young woman named Sarah, came to Tracy's apartment a week after the crash. "Ms. Bennett, the whole town is talking about what you did," Sarah said. "How does it feel to be called a hero?" "Honestly, I'm not comfortable with that word," Tracy replied. "I was just doing what I was trained to do." "Anyone with medical training would have done the same thing. But you're not currently working as a nurse, are you?" "Can you tell us about that?" Tracy hesitated, then decided to tell her story. If she was going to do this interview, she might as well be honest. 3 years ago, I worked as a nurse pilot for an air ambulance service. We transported critically ill patients to hospitals. One day, I was flying a patient during bad weather. The patient had a heart attack. I got him to the hospital as fast as I could, but he didn't make it. He died. "I'm sorry," Sarah said gently. "Thank you." The investigation cleared me of any wrongdoing. Everyone said I did everything right, but I couldn't forgive myself. I developed PTSD. I couldn't fly anymore. I couldn't work in emergency medicine anymore. So I became a bus driver. It was supposed to be a quiet, peaceful job where I didn't have to deal with life or death situations. But then this crash happened. Yes, and something strange happened. When that bus went over, when I realized people were hurt, all my training just came back. I didn't think about it. I didn't have time to be afraid. I just acted. And it felt right. It felt like I was doing what I was meant to do. "So what happens now?" Sarah asked. "Will you go back to nursing?" "I don't know," Tracy said honestly. "I'm still thinking about it. But this crash showed me something important. It showed me that I don't have to be afraid anymore, that I can handle emergency situations, that I can help people without falling apart." The interview was published 2 days later. The headline read, "From Tragedy to Triumph. Bus driver overcomes PTSD to save lives." Tracy read the article several times. Seeing her story in print, seeing it described as a triumph, felt strange, but also liberating. For 3 years, she had thought of herself as someone who failed, someone who let a patient die, someone who couldn't handle the pressure of emergency medicine. But now she was seeing herself differently. She was someone who had experienced trauma and had found a way to heal. Someone who had fallen down and gotten back up. Someone who, when the moment came, had been able to help people in their darkest hour. A week after the crash, Tracy received a phone call that surprised her. "Miss Bennett? This is Robert Chang. I was your supervisor at the air ambulance service." Robert, how are you? I'm well. More importantly, how are you? I saw the news about the crash and what you did. I wanted to reach out. I'm okay, Tracy said. Physically, I'm healing fine. Emotionally, I'm processing it all. I can imagine. Tracy, I want to tell you something. When you left us 3 years ago, it broke my heart. You were one of our best pilots and nurses. What happened with David Miller was tragic, but it wasn't your fault. I've always felt that we lost a valuable member of our team. Thank you, Robert. That means a lot. I'm not calling to pressure you or anything, Robert continued. But if you ever want to come back, in any capacity, our door is open. We'd love to have you. Even if you don't want to fly anymore, we always need experienced nurses on the ground team. Or you could teach. We have a training program for new hires. You have so much knowledge and experience to share. Tracy felt a flutter in her chest. Come back? Go back to emergency medicine? A week ago, she would have said it was impossible. But now? Can I think about it? Tracy asked. Of course. Take all the time you need. The offer stands whenever you're ready. After hanging up, Tracy sat in silence for a long time. Could she really go back? Not to flying? She knew that chapter of her life was closed. But to helping people in emergency situations? To using her medical skills again? She thought about how she had felt during and after the crash. She thought about the passengers she had helped. She thought about Mr. Garcia, who was now recovering in the hospital and had sent her a thank you card. She thought about the sense of purpose she had felt, the feeling of doing what she was meant to do. Maybe it was time for a change. Maybe it was time to stop running from her past and instead embrace what it had taught her.
Tracy scheduled an appointment with Dr. Chen to talk about everything that had happened. You've been through a major traumatic event, Dr. Chen said as they sat in her comfortable office. How are you processing it? That's the strange thing, Tracy replied. I expected to have a breakdown. I expected the PTSD to come roaring back, but it hasn't. I mean, I have moments where I replay the crash in my mind. I have some trouble sleeping, but it's not the same as before. I don't feel that crushing guilt. I don't feel like I failed. Why do you think that is? Tracy thought carefully before answering. Because this time, everyone lived. This time, I was able to help. This time, my training and skills made a difference. It's like I got a second chance to prove to myself that I'm capable, that I'm not a failure. That's a very healthy perspective, Dr. Chen said, but I want to make sure you're not putting too much pressure on yourself. You didn't fail with David Miller. You know that intellectually, even if your emotions haven't fully accepted it yet. I know, but maybe it doesn't matter whether I failed or not. Maybe what matters is that I tried, both times. With David, I tried my absolute best to save him, even though the weather was terrible and the situation was almost impossible. And with the bus crash, I tried my best to help everyone, even though I was hurt and scared. I think I'm finally understanding that trying your best is all anyone can do. Sometimes people die anyway. Sometimes bad things happen anyway. But that doesn't mean I failed. It just means I'm human, and I have limits. Dr. Chen smiled. That's a profound realization, Tracy. That's the kind of wisdom that comes from truly processing trauma. So what are you going to do with this realization?
Tracy told her about Robert's phone call and his offer to return to the air ambulance service. What do you think about that? Dr. Chen asked. I'm scared, Tracy admitted. But I'm also excited. For the first time in 3 years, I'm thinking about the future with something other than dread. I'm thinking maybe I could help people again. Not as a pilot. I know I'm not ready for that, maybe never will be. but there are other ways to use my skills. There's no rush to decide, Dr. Chen said, but I think you should seriously consider it. The bus crash showed you that you can handle emergency situations without falling apart. That's huge progress. But you also need to be realistic about the challenges. Working in emergency medicine again will trigger memories. It will be difficult at times. You'll need to have a strong support system and continue with therapy. I know, Tracy said, but I think I'm ready to try. Not right away, but soon.
Over the next few weeks, Tracy thought long and hard about her future. She went back to work at the bus depot, but only part-time. Frank was understanding and flexible, letting her work reduced hours while she recovered. Her passengers were thrilled to see her back. On her first day driving again, several regular passengers brought her flowers and cards. "Thank you for everything you did," they said. "We're so glad you're okay." "Thank you," Tracy replied, genuinely touched by their kindness. But as she drove her routes, Tracy found herself thinking more and more about Robert's offer. She missed the excitement of emergency medicine. She missed the feeling of making a real difference in critical moments. She missed being part of a team that saved lives. One evening, Tracy called her mother and told her about everything that had happened and her thoughts about returning to emergency medicine.
Oh, honey, her mother said, I think it's wonderful that you're considering it. You were always meant to help people. That's who you are at your core. But you need to make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. Are you trying to prove something, or are you genuinely ready to go back? It was a good question. Tracy thought about it for a long time. I think I'm genuinely ready, she finally said. The bus crash showed me that I can do this. That I don't have to be afraid anymore. And more than that, it showed me how much I miss it. How much I miss using my skills to help people in their darkest moments. Then I support you completely, her mother said. Just promise me you'll take care of yourself. Don't push too hard too fast. I promise. In December, 3 months after the crash, Tracy called Robert. I've been thinking about your offer, she said, and I'd like to accept, but with conditions. I'm listening. I don't want to fly. Not yet. Maybe not ever. And I want to start slow. Maybe part-time at first. I need to ease back into it. Absolutely, Robert said. We have several positions that would work. You could work on the ground team, responding to calls with the ambulances but not flying. Or you could work in our training department, teaching new hires. Or you could do a combination of both, whatever you're comfortable with. I think I'd like to do a combination, Tracy said. I want to get back into active medicine, but I also think I could teach well. I've learned so much from my experiences, both the good and the bad. That sounds perfect. When can you start? Tracy took a deep breath. After the new year. I want to finish out my commitment to the bus company through the holiday season. They've been good to me, and I want to leave things in a good place. January it is then. Welcome back, Tracy. We've missed you. Tracy spent the rest of December preparing for her transition. She talked to Frank and officially gave her notice, though she would stay on as a part-time driver if they ever needed coverage. Frank was sad to see her go full-time, but understood. You're meant for bigger things than driving a bus, Frank told her, though you were one hell of a good bus driver. Tracy also spent time reconnecting with her old colleagues from the air ambulance service. She met several of them for coffee or lunch, hearing about what had changed in the 3 years she'd been gone. New equipment, new protocols, new staff members. It was familiar, yet different, and Tracy found herself looking forward to being part of it again. She continued her therapy sessions with Dr. Chen, who helped her prepare mentally and emotionally for the transition. Remember that there will be difficult days, Dr. Chen reminded her. There will be calls that trigger memories of David Miller. There will be times when you question whether you made the right decision. That's normal. The important thing is to have strategies for dealing with those moments. They worked on coping techniques, breathing exercises, grounding techniques, ways to manage anxiety if it started to creep back. Dr. Chen also helped Tracy develop a plan for what to do if she ever felt overwhelmed. "You need to promise me that if it becomes too much, you'll speak up," Dr. Chen said. "Don't try to tough it out alone. Talk to your supervisor, talk to your colleagues, and keep seeing me regularly." "I promise," Tracy said. "I've learned that asking for help isn't weakness, it's wisdom." Christmas came and went. Tracy spent it quietly with her family, grateful to be alive and healthy. She thought about the passengers from the bus crash and wondered how they were spending their holiday. She had received updates that everyone had recovered well. Mr. Garcia had gone home after 2 weeks in the hospital. Lisa Chen's ribs had healed completely. Mrs. Henderson's arm was in a cast, but she was doing fine. On New Year's Eve, Tracy stood at her apartment window and watched fireworks light up the sky over Riverside. She thought about the past 3 years, the tragedy with David Miller, the depression and anxiety that followed, the slow process of healing, the bus crash and the unexpected return of her confidence and skills. It had been a long, difficult journey, but she had survived. More than that, she had grown. She was stronger now than she had been before David Miller's death. She was more compassionate, more understanding of human limitations, more forgiving of herself and others. As the clock struck midnight and the new year began, Tracy made a silent promise to herself. She would move forward with courage. She would use her skills to help people. She would honor David Miller's memory by being the best medical professional she could be. And she would remember that failing didn't make her a failure. It made her human. Tracy's first day back at the air ambulance service was in mid-January. She woke up early, her stomach fluttering with nervous excitement. She put on her new uniform, not the pilot's flight suit she used to wear, but the ground team's medical uniform. It felt right. Robert met her at the base, which looked much the same as she remembered. The hangar still housed the helicopters, their red and white paint gleaming in the morning sun. The operations room still had the same layout, with dispatch radios crackling and monitors showing weather data. But there were new faces, younger paramedics and pilots who hadn't been there during her time. "Welcome back, Tracy," Robert said warmly. "Let me show you around and introduce you to everyone." The morning was spent getting reoriented. Tracy met her new colleagues, went through safety briefings, and reviewed the updated protocols and procedures. She would be working on the ground team 3 days a week, responding to emergency calls in a ground ambulance that worked in coordination with the air ambulance. The other 2 days, she would work in the training department, helping to educate new hires. Her partner on the ground team was a young paramedic named Chris, who was about 30 years old and had been with the service for 2 years. "I've heard a lot about you," Chris said as they checked their ambulance and equipment. "Robert told us about your history here and what you did during that bus crash. It's an honor to work with you." "Thank you," Tracy said, "but let's just focus on doing good work together. I'm not here to be a legend. I'm here to help people." Their first call came at 10 in the morning. A construction worker had fallen from scaffolding at a building site downtown. Possible head injury and broken bones. As they climbed into the ambulance and Chris started the engine, Tracy felt a moment of anxiety. This was it. This was the moment she had been preparing for. Could she really do this? Could she handle another emergency without falling apart? The anxiety faded as they drove, replaced by focus and determination. This was what she was trained for. This was what she knew how to do. They arrived at the construction site within 6 minutes. The worker, a man named Tom who was about 40 years old, was lying on the ground, His co-workers had been smart enough not to move him. Tom was conscious but in obvious pain. Tracy knelt beside him, her medical training taking over completely. "Hi, Tom. I'm Tracy. I'm a nurse. Can you tell me where it hurts?" "My leg," Tom gasped, "and my head. Everything hurts." Tracy quickly assessed him. Possible head injury from the fall. Definitely a broken leg. Possibly broken ribs. But he was conscious, breathing, and his vital signs were relatively stable. A yellow patient, serious but not immediately critical. She and Chris worked together smoothly, stabilizing Tom's neck with a collar, carefully moving him onto a backboard, starting an IV line, providing pain medication. Tom was loaded into the ambulance, and they were on their way to the hospital within 12 minutes of arriving. In the back of the ambulance, Tracy monitored Tom's condition while Chris drove. She checked his pupils, his blood pressure, his breathing. She kept him talking to make sure he stayed conscious. "You're doing great, Tom," she said. "We'll have you at the hospital in just a few minutes." And they did. Tom was handed over to the emergency room team, and Tracy and Chris completed their paperwork and cleaned the ambulance. "Nice work," Chris said. "You were really calm back there." "Thank you," Tracy replied. And then she realized something. She had been calm. She hadn't panicked. She hadn't frozen. She had simply done the job, and it had felt natural and right. The rest of Tracy's first week went smoothly. She responded to several more calls with Chris. A heart attack, a car accident, a severe allergic reaction. Each call was different. Each presented its own challenges, but Tracy handled them all with professional competence. On Friday afternoon, Tracy had her first training session. She was teaching a class of 5 new paramedics about trauma assessment and treatment. As she stood in front of the group, she felt a different kind of nervousness. Could she teach? Could she share her knowledge effectively? But as she began talking, explaining the principles of trauma care, demonstrating proper techniques, the nervousness faded. The new paramedics were attentive and asked good questions. Tracy found herself enjoying the teaching process, especially when she could share real examples from her years of experience. The most important thing in any emergency situation, Tracy told her students, is to stay calm. When everyone around you is panicking, you need to be the calm center. Your patients need that, their families need that, and your partners need that. Being calm doesn't mean you're not feeling emotions. It means you're controlling them so you can do your job effectively. One of the students raised her hand. But how do you stay calm when things are really bad? When someone is dying and there's nothing you can do? Tracy paused, thinking carefully about her answer. That's the hardest part of this job. There will be times when you can't save someone, no matter what you do. Those times will haunt you. They'll make you question everything. But you have to remember that all you can do is your best. You can't control outcomes. You can only control your actions. Do everything you can, use all your training and skills, and then accept whatever happens. And please, if those times affect you deeply, don't be afraid to seek help. Talk to someone. Get therapy if you need it. There's no shame in being affected by trauma. There's only shame in pretending it doesn't affect you. The students nodded, understanding the wisdom in her words. After the class ended, several of them came up to thank her. "That was really helpful," one young woman said. "And that part about trauma, thank you for being honest about that. My uncle was a paramedic and he struggled with PTSD. It's good to hear someone acknowledge that this job can be really hard mentally, not just physically." As Tracy drove home that evening, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had made it through her first week. She had handled emergency calls without falling apart. She had taught well. She had taken the first real steps toward building her new life in emergency medicine. Over the following weeks and months, Tracy settled into her new routine. Her work with Chris continued to go well. They developed a good partnership, learning to anticipate each other's actions and communicate efficiently during calls. Some calls were difficult. Some reminded Tracy of her time flying and of David Miller, but she was learning to manage those moments without letting them overwhelm her. One call in particular stood out. It was a cardiac arrest, a man in his 30s who had collapsed at home. His wife called 911 in panic. Tracy and Chris arrived within minutes, but the man was already gone. Despite their best efforts at resuscitation, despite the paramedics in the helicopter that arrived to help, despite everything the hospital team tried, the man died. Tracy felt the familiar weight of grief and guilt starting to creep in as they left the hospital that night. But this time, she recognized it. She didn't push it away or try to pretend she was fine. She talked to Chris about it. "That was rough," she said. "He was so young." His wife was so devastated. "Yeah," Chris agreed quietly. "Those are the hardest ones. When they're young and you know they had so much life ahead of them. I keep thinking about what we could have done differently." "Tracy," Chris said gently, "we did everything right. You know that. His heart it was too damaged. It happens sometimes." "I know," Tracy said. "I know intellectually, but emotionally, it's harder to accept." "Are you okay?" Chris asked with concern. "I will be," Tracy said honestly. "I just need to process it. Maybe talk to my therapist about it. But I'm not going to let it destroy me. Not this time." And she didn't. She went to see Dr. Chen the next day and talked through her feelings. She cried, which was healthy. She acknowledged her grief, which was important. But she didn't let the guilt take over. She accepted that she had done her best, and that sometimes, sadly, people died anyway. "You've come so far," Dr. Chen told her with evident pride. 3 years ago, losing David Miller nearly destroyed you. Now you're able to experience a similar loss, feel the appropriate emotions, but not let it overwhelm you. That's tremendous growth. Tracy's teaching work also continued to flourish. She became known among the new hires as someone who was both skilled and compassionate, someone who understood not just the technical aspects of emergency medicine, but also the emotional and psychological challenges. She developed a special session in her training program about dealing with trauma and PTSD. She openly shared her own story about David Miller, her breakdown, and her recovery. The new paramedics and nurses appreciated her honesty and vulnerability. "I'm telling you this," Tracy explained to one class, "because I want you to know that it's okay to struggle. It's okay to be affected by this work. The important thing is to recognize when you need help and to actually get that help. Don't wait 3 years like I did. Don't let the trauma build up until it breaks you. Be proactive about your mental health." In April, about 3 months after Tracy returned to work, she received an unexpected visitor. David Miller's widow, Jennifer, had contacted the air ambulance service and asked if she could meet Tracy. Tracy's first instinct was to refuse. What could she possibly say to the woman whose husband she had failed to save? But Robert encouraged her to meet with Jennifer. "I think it might be good for both of you," he said. "She asked specifically to meet you. That has to mean something." So Tracy agreed. They met at a quiet coffee shop in town on a Saturday afternoon. Jennifer was a woman in her mid-30s, with kind eyes that showed the weight of grief but also strength. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me," Jennifer said as they sat down with their coffee. "Of course," Tracy replied, though her heart was pounding. I've wanted to tell you how sorry I am, about David, about not getting him to the hospital in time." Jennifer shook her head. "That's not why I wanted to meet you. I've read the investigation report. I've talked to the doctors. I know you did everything you could. I know the weather was terrible and that David's heart attack was so severe that he probably would have died anyway, even if you'd gotten him there faster. Then why did you want to meet me? Tracy asked, confused. Because I wanted to thank you, Jennifer said, and to tell you something important. After David died, I was angry. Not at you specifically, but at the situation, at fate, at God, at everything. But as time passed, I realized something. You and your partner tried so hard to save David. You risked your own safety flying in that terrible weather. You did everything humanly possible, and that matters. It matters to me and to my children that someone cared enough to try that hard. Tracy felt tears starting to form in her eyes. I wish I could have saved him. I wish that too, Jennifer said softly. Every single day. But you gave him a chance. That's more than he would have had without you. And I wanted you to know that I don't blame you. I never blamed you. I don't want you carrying around guilt over something that wasn't your fault. Thank you, Tracy whispered. You don't know how much I needed to hear that. They talked for over an hour. Jennifer told Tracy about David, about their life together, about their children who were now 9 and 11 years old. Tracy listened and shared some of her own story about the trauma and recovery. I heard about what you did during that bus crash, Jennifer said. I saw it on the news. And I thought, there she is. There's the woman who tried so hard to save my husband. Still out there helping people. Still being brave. I was so proud of you, even though we'd never met. I don't feel brave most of the time, Tracy admitted. That's what makes you brave, Jennifer replied. Being brave isn't about not being afraid. It's about being afraid and doing it anyway. When they parted ways, Jennifer hugged Tracy tightly. Thank you for everything you did for David. And thank you for continuing to help people. The world needs more people like you. Tracy drove home with tears streaming down her face. But they were healing tears. For 3 years, she had carried the weight of David Miller's death like a stone on her heart. But now, finally, she felt like she could put that stone down. Jennifer's forgiveness, though Tracy had never really needed to be forgiven, gave her the permission she needed to forgive herself.
By summer, Tracy had been back at work for 6 months. She had settled completely into her dual role as ground team member and instructor. She loved the variety of her work and felt like she was making a real difference in both capacities. One warm July morning, Tracy was scheduled to teach a class when Robert came to find her. "Tracy, can I talk to you for a minute?" he asked. "Of course," Tracy said, wondering what was up. They went to Robert's office, where he closed the door and sat down behind his desk. "I have a proposition for you," Robert said. "I've been watching your work these past 6 months, and I'm incredibly impressed. Your skills as a medical professional are as sharp as ever, and you've become one of our best instructors. The new hires love your classes, and your teaching has improved our training program significantly." "Thank you," Tracy said, pleased by the praise but wondering where this was going. "I want to offer you a new position," Robert continued, Director of Training and Education. "You would oversee our entire training program, develop curriculum, teach the most advanced classes, and mentor our instructors. It would be a leadership role with more responsibility and, of course, better pay." Tracy was surprised. That's a big step. I'm honored that you'd consider me." "You're the obvious choice," Robert said. "But I know you also enjoy the hands-on medical work with the ground team. So this is what I'm thinking. You would work 4 days a week in the training role and 1 day a week on the ground team, just to stay sharp and maintain your skills. Would that interest you?" Tracy thought about it. A leadership role. The chance to shape the training program and influence how new emergency medical professionals were prepared. the opportunity to teach more advanced skills and help develop other instructors. It was exciting and intimidating at the same time. "Can I think about it?" Tracy asked. "Of course. Take your time, but I hope you'll say yes. You're too valuable to waste on just one role." Over the next week, Tracy considered the offer carefully. She talked to Chris, who encouraged her to take it. She talked to Dr. Chen, who thought it sounded like a perfect next step. She talked to her mother, who was thrilled and proud. Finally, Tracy called Robert and accepted the position. She started her new role in August. It was challenging in new ways. She had to learn about budgets and scheduling and curriculum development. She had to manage other instructors and deal with administrative issues, but she loved it. She loved the creativity of developing new training modules. She loved mentoring younger instructors and watching them grow. She loved knowing that she was helping to prepare the next generation of emergency medical professionals. One of her first initiatives was to add a mandatory mental health component to all training programs. Every new hire would receive education about PTSD, stress management, and the importance of seeking help when needed. "This isn't optional," Tracy told her team of instructors. "We're going to make sure every person who works here knows that their mental health is just as important as their physical health. We're going to create a culture where it's okay to struggle and okay to ask for help." The initiative was well received. Several veteran employees approached Tracy privately to thank her for bringing attention to this issue. Some shared their own struggles with trauma and mental health. "I wish we'd had this kind of support when I started," one paramedic told her. "Maybe I wouldn't have struggled for so long before finally getting help." In October, a year after the bus crash, Tracy received an invitation to a ceremony. The town of Riverside was honoring her with a community service award for her actions during the crash. They wanted to present it at a special event with the mayor and other local officials. Tracy was reluctant to accept. She didn't like being the center of attention, but Maria convinced her to go. "You deserve this recognition," Maria said. "And more importantly, your story can inspire other people. Let them celebrate you." So Tracy went to the ceremony, held at the Riverside Community Center on a beautiful fall evening. Many of her passengers from the bus crash were there. Mr. Garcia came with his wife, walking with only a slight limp now. Lisa Chen brought her family. Mrs. Henderson was there with her arm fully healed. The mother and baby were there. The baby now a walking, babbling toddler.
The mayor gave a speech about courage and heroism. Several passengers spoke about what Tracy had done and how it had impacted them. Tracy felt embarrassed, but also deeply moved. When it was her turn to speak, Tracy stood at the podium and looked out at the audience. "Thank you all for this incredible honor," she began. "But I need to be honest with you. When that bus crash happened, I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was just doing what I was trained to do, what any medical professional would have done in that situation." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "But that day changed my life in a profound way. You see, 3 years before the crash, I experienced a terrible tragedy in my work as a nurse pilot. I lost a patient, and that loss traumatized me so badly that I had to leave emergency medicine. I thought I could never do that kind of work again. I thought I was broken. The bus crash showed me I wasn't broken. It showed me that all my training and experience were still there, waiting to be used. It showed me that I could face my fears and come out stronger on the other side. So really, you all gave me a gift that day. You gave me the chance to rediscover myself and my purpose. Today, I'm back working in emergency medicine, though in a different capacity than before. I'm helping to train the next generation of paramedics and nurses. I'm teaching them not just medical skills, but also how to take care of themselves mentally and emotionally. I'm trying to make sure they don't have to struggle the way I struggled. So this award, it's not just mine. It belongs to everyone who supported me during my darkest times. My therapist who helped me heal. My family who never gave up on me. My friends who stood by me. My colleagues who welcomed me back. And all of you, my passengers from that day, who reminded me why I became a nurse in the first place, to help people when they need it most. The audience applauded, many people with tears in their eyes. After the ceremony, Tracy was surrounded by people wanting to shake her hand or hug her. It was overwhelming, but in a good way. Mr. Garcia approached her with his wife. "Ms. Bennett," he said, "I owe you my life. The doctors told me I would have died from blood loss if you hadn't put that tourniquet on my leg. My wife and we can never thank you enough." "You don't need to thank me," Tracy said. "I'm just glad you're okay. That everyone is okay. But we do need to thank you," Mr. Garcia's wife said, "because you're the reason my husband is still here. The reason our children still have their father. You gave us more time together, and that's the greatest gift anyone could give." Tracy hugged them both, feeling overwhelmed by emotion. As the evening wound down and people started to leave, Tracy stood outside the community center, looking up at the stars. The night was clear and cool, perfect October weather. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the highs and lows, the triumphs and tragedies, the fear and the courage. She wasn't the same person she had been 4 years ago when David Miller died. That Tracy had been confident, but perhaps too confident. She had believed she could control outcomes through skill and determination. She had never really faced her own limitations. The new Tracy understood things differently. She knew that control was often an illusion. She knew that bad things happened even when you did everything right. She knew that trauma was real and needed to be acknowledged and treated. But she also knew that trauma didn't have to define you, that you could be broken and still put yourself back together, maybe even stronger than before. Maria came out to find her. "Hey, you okay out here?" Maria asked. "Yeah," Tracy said with a smile. "Just thinking. About everything. It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?" "It really has. You know, a year ago I was just trying to get through each day without falling apart. And now I feel like I'm actually living again. Really living, not just existing." "That's beautiful," Maria said. "And you deserve it. You've worked so hard to get here." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars. "By the way," Maria said, "I heard you got promoted at the ambulance service. Director of Training and Education. That's impressive." "Thanks. I'm excited about it. It feels like the right next step." "Are you happy, Tracy?" Tracy thought about the question carefully. "Yes," she finally said. "I am. I'm not the same kind of happy I was before the trauma. I don't have that naive confidence anymore. But I have something deeper now. I have peace. I have purpose. I have an understanding of myself and my strengths and my limitations. So yes, I'm happy. Maybe more genuinely happy than I've ever been." 2 years after the bus crash, Tracy's life had found a new equilibrium. She was thriving in her role as Director of Training and Education. The training program had expanded significantly under her leadership, and the air ambulance service had gained a reputation for having some of the best-trained emergency medical personnel in the region. Tracy continued to work 1 day a week on the ground team with Chris. These days kept her connected to the real work of emergency medicine and ensured her teaching stayed grounded in actual practice. She and Chris had become close friends, and he often joked that he was learning more from her than he could from any textbook. One spring morning, Tracy arrived at the base to find Robert waiting for her with a smile on his face. "I have some news," he said. The state medical board wants to use our training program as a model for other emergency services across the state. They're particularly interested in your mental health and trauma awareness curriculum. Really? Tracy was surprised and pleased. Really? They want you to present at their annual conference in September. It's a big deal, Tracy. Your work is making waves. Tracy did present at the conference, sharing her story and her approach to training that included mental health awareness. Her presentation was well received, and several other emergency services reached out to learn from her program. As her influence grew, Tracy found herself thinking more about David Miller, not with guilt anymore, but with a sense of purpose. His death had been the catalyst for her transformation. In a way, his tragedy had led to something positive: a better understanding of trauma in emergency services, better support systems for struggling medical professionals, better training for new hires. One day, Tracy did something she had been thinking about for a while. She reached out to Jennifer Miller and asked if they could meet again. They met at the same coffee shop where they had first met 2 years earlier. Jennifer looked well. The deep grief that had marked her features before had softened into a calmer sadness. "How are your children?" Tracy asked. "They're doing well," Jennifer said. "It's been hard growing up without their father. But they're resilient. They're good kids. David would be proud of them." "I'm sure he would be," Tracy said. "Jennifer, I wanted to talk to you about something. I've been developing a training program for emergency medical personnel that includes a strong focus on mental health and dealing with trauma. It's become quite successful, and I believe it's helping people who work in emergency services cope better with the difficult things they see and experience." "That's wonderful," Jennifer said. "The program has grown beyond just our service," Tracy continued. "It's starting to be adopted across the state. And I was wondering, would you be comfortable with me naming the program after David? I'd like to call it the David Miller Memorial Training Initiative. I want his name to be associated with something that helps people, something that might prevent other medical professionals from going through what I went through." Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. "Tracy, that would mean so much to me and my family. To know that David's name is connected to something positive, something that helps people. Yes, absolutely yes." "Thank you," Tracy said, feeling emotional herself. "I'll make sure to honor his memory well." The David Miller Memorial Training Initiative was officially launched that fall. Jennifer and her children attended the launch ceremony. Tracy made a speech about David, about what his death had taught her, and about the importance of supporting the mental health of those who work in emergency services. "David Miller was a husband, father, son, and friend," Tracy said to the assembled crowd. "His death was a tragedy that touched many lives, including mine. But from that tragedy has grown something meaningful. This training initiative will ensure that emergency medical personnel have the tools and support they need to deal with the trauma they experience. It will help prevent burnout and PTSD. It will save careers and maybe even lives. And that is a legacy worthy of David Miller's memory." The initiative gained traction quickly. More and more emergency services adopted Tracy's curriculum. She found herself traveling occasionally to other cities to train instructors or speak at conferences. She was becoming a recognized expert in the field of emergency medical training with a focus on mental health. But despite her growing reputation and busy schedule, Tracy always made time for the direct work. She continued her weekly shifts on the ground team. She continued teaching classes herself rather than delegating everything to other instructors. She wanted to stay connected to the real work, to remember why all of this mattered. One day during a shift with Chris, they responded to a call that hit close to home for Tracy. A helicopter had made an emergency landing in a field after experiencing mechanical problems. The pilot and nurse were shaken but unhurt, but they needed to be checked over and the incident needed to be investigated. As Tracy and Chris arrived at the scene, Tracy felt a wave of emotion. The helicopter looked so much like the one she used to fly. The pilot and nurse looked so much like her younger self. Dedicated, skilled, but also vulnerable to the trauma that could come with this work. Tracy approached the nurse, a young woman named Rachel, who was visibly shaken. "Hi, I'm Tracy." "I'm a nurse too. Are you hurt at all?" "No," Rachel said, her voice trembling. "Just scared. I thought we were going to crash. I thought we were going to die." "But you didn't," Tracy said gently. "You landed safely. Your pilot did a great job. You both did great." "I don't know if I can get back in a helicopter after this," Rachel admitted. "What if it happens again?" Tracy understood that fear intimately. "It's normal to feel that way after something scary," she said. "Give yourself time to process what happened. Talk to someone about it. A counselor, a colleague, a friend. Don't bottle it up. And if you find that the fear doesn't go away, that's okay too. Sometimes our bodies and minds tell us when we need to make a change. There's no shame in listening to that message." Rachel looked at Tracy with surprise. "Most people would just tell me to get back on the horse, you know." "I'm not most people," Tracy said with a slight smile. "I used to be a helicopter nurse pilot. I had a traumatic experience and couldn't fly anymore. I thought my career was over, but I found a different path, and I'm happier now than I ever was before. So whatever happens, whether you fly again or not, know that you have options. You're not trapped. You can choose what's right for you." Later, after they had finished at the scene and were driving back to the base, Chris asked Tracy about what she had said to Rachel. "That was really good advice," he said. "Not the usual suck it up message people in this field usually get." "I wish someone had told me those things when I was struggling," Tracy replied. "Maybe I wouldn't have suffered alone for so long. That's why I say them now, whenever I get the chance." As the years continued to pass, Tracy built a life she was proud of. She remained close with Jennifer Miller and her children, developing a friendship that was healing for everyone involved. She watched Jennifer slowly rebuild her life, eventually starting to date again, finding joy where there had been only grief. Tracy's relationship with Dr. Chen evolved from doctor-patient to more of a professional consultation. They met occasionally to discuss difficult cases or situations, but Tracy no longer needed regular therapy. She had developed her own tools for managing stress and trauma, and she used them well. Tracy also maintained her friendships in Riverside. She still saw Maria regularly, even though she no longer drove buses. She still volunteered at the library sometimes, reading to children on Saturday mornings. She had become part of the community, and they had become part of her. On the 5th anniversary of the bus crash, Riverside held a small remembrance ceremony. All the survivors came, now thoroughly recovered and living full lives. They shared stories about that day and about how Tracy's actions had impacted them. "I think about that day often," Mrs. Henderson said during the ceremony. "Not with fear or sadness, but with gratitude. Gratitude that Tracy was our driver. Gratitude that we all survived. Gratitude for the reminder that life is precious and can change in an instant." After the ceremony, Tracy walked alone through the hills where the crash had happened. The road had been improved since then, with better barriers and warning signs. The spot where the bus had gone over was marked with a small memorial plaque that read, "In honor of the 23 passengers and driver who survived the crash of October 15th, 2025, may we never take our safety or our heroes for granted." Tracy stood there for a long time, remembering the fear, the adrenaline, the desperate work to help people, the satisfaction of knowing everyone survived. That day had been terrifying, but it had also been transformative. It had given her back something she thought she had lost forever, her confidence in herself as a medical professional. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Tracy felt a sense of profound peace. She had been through the fire and come out stronger. She had faced her demons and won. She had taken her trauma and turned it into something positive, something that helped others. Tracy was now 55 years old. She had gray hair and lines around her eyes. Her body ached sometimes from old injuries and the general wear of life. But she felt more alive, more purposeful, more genuinely herself than she ever had before. She thought about the younger Tracy, the one who had flown helicopters with such confidence and pride. That Tracy had been good at her job, but she had never really been tested. She had never faced real adversity. She had never known her own strength because she had never needed to find it. This Tracy, older, wiser, marked by grief and trauma and healing, knew her strength. She knew her limitations too, but that was just as important. She knew when to push and when to rest. She knew when to be strong and when to ask for help. She knew that failing didn't make you a failure, and that falling down didn't mean you couldn't get back up.
Tracy worked as Director of Training and Education for many years. The David Miller Memorial Training Initiative continued to grow and expand, eventually being adopted not just across her state, but in several neighboring states as well. She trained hundreds of emergency medical personnel, teaching them not just medical skills, but also wisdom about resilience, mental health, and self-care. Many of her former students went on to successful careers in emergency medicine. They often wrote to her, telling her how her teaching had impacted them, how her emphasis on mental health had helped them through difficult times, how her story had inspired them. One of her students, a young woman named Sophia, came to Tracy years after graduating from the program. "I wanted to thank you," Sophia said. "I've been working as a paramedic for 5 years now, and I recently went through something really hard. I lost a patient, a child, and it devastated me. But because of your teaching, because of your emphasis on seeking help when you need it, I immediately went to counseling. I didn't wait. I didn't try to tough it out alone. And I'm okay. I'm processing the grief in a healthy way. If it wasn't for what you taught me, I might have fallen apart like so many others in this field do." "I'm so glad you got help," Tracy said, giving Sophia a hug. "And I'm sorry about your patient. That's always the hardest part of this job. You taught me that it's okay to be affected by these things," Sophia said. "That being affected doesn't make me weak. That actually made all the difference. So thank you. You probably saved my career, maybe even my life." Stories like Sophia's reminded Tracy why she did what she did. Every student she trained, every medical professional she helped, every person who learned from her experience, they were her legacy. They were the ripples spreading out from the stone that had been thrown into the water 5 years ago during that bus crash. When Tracy eventually retired at the age of 65, there was a large celebration at the air ambulance service. Robert, now preparing for his own retirement, gave a speech about Tracy's impact on the organization and the field. "When Tracy came back to us after her trauma," Robert said, "I thought we were lucky to have her back, even in a diminished capacity. But I was wrong. We weren't getting back a diminished version of Tracy. We were getting an enhanced version. Someone who had been broken and rebuilt, who had learned profound lessons about resilience and humanity, who had developed wisdom that could only come from truly surviving something difficult." Tracy didn't just come back. She came back better, and she made all of us better in the process. Tracy stood to speak, looking out at the crowd of colleagues, friends, students, and family. "Thank you all for this wonderful celebration," she began. "When I look back at my career, I see it in 2 parts, the before and the after. Before David Miller's death, I was a competent nurse pilot. I did my job well. I saved lives. But I was also, in some ways, naive. I thought skill and determination could overcome anything. I thought I could control outcomes. David's death shattered that illusion. It broke me. For a long time, I thought I would never be whole again. But slowly, with the help of wonderful people, my therapist, Dr. Chen, my family, my friends, my colleagues, and even the passengers from the bus crash, I rebuilt myself. And in rebuilding, I became something different, something more. The afterpart of my career has been shorter in years, but richer in impact. I learned that true strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up. I learned that failure is part of being human, and that we need to forgive ourselves for our limitations. I learned that asking for help isn't weakness, but wisdom. And most importantly, I learned that trauma can either destroy you or transform you, and the difference often comes down to whether you face it or run from it. I chose to face it, and in facing it, I found my true purpose. Not just saving individual lives, but helping to create a culture in emergency medicine where mental health matters, where trauma is acknowledged and treated, where people can admit when they're struggling without fear of judgment or shame. So thank you, all of you, for being part of this journey. Thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. Thank you for supporting the David Miller Memorial Training Initiative. Thank you for helping create a better, more compassionate emergency medical service. And thank you to David Miller, whose death was a tragedy, but whose legacy has become something beautiful and healing.
After her retirement, Tracy stayed involved in emergency medicine as a consultant and occasional speaker. But she also finally allowed herself to slow down and enjoy life. She traveled, visiting places she had always wanted to see. She spent more time with family and friends. She took up painting, finding peace in the creative process. But she never forgot where she had been or what she had learned. She continued to speak openly about trauma and mental health whenever asked. She mentored young professionals who were struggling with difficult experiences in their careers. She remained a voice for compassion and understanding in a field that could sometimes be harsh and unforgiving. On the 10th anniversary of the bus crash, Tracy returned to Riverside for another ceremony. Many of her former passengers were there, now 10 years older, their lives having continued forward from that pivotal day. Mr. Garcia, now in his 70s, had become a grandfather. He introduced Tracy to his grandson with pride. "This is the woman who saved my life," he told the little boy. "I wouldn't be here to meet you if it wasn't for her." Lisa Chen had gone back to school and become a nurse herself, inspired by Tracy's actions during the crash. "You showed me what real courage and competence look like," Lisa told Tracy. "I wanted to be able to help people the way you helped us." The teenage boy, Mike, was now in his mid-20s and working as an EMT. "That day changed my life," he told Tracy. "Watching you work so calmly and professionally in such a terrible situation. I knew that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be someone who could help people in their darkest moments." Tracy was overwhelmed by these stories. She had never fully realized the extent of her impact on that day and all the days since. She had just been doing what needed to be done, what she was trained to do. But to these people, she had been a hero. She had been an inspiration. She had been the catalyst for positive changes in their lives. As she stood at the memorial plaque once again, now weathered by 10 years of sun and rain, Tracy reflected on her journey. From confident nurse pilot to broken trauma survivor to determined healer to respected educator and advocate. It had been a long, winding path, full of pain and growth and ultimately redemption. She thought about David Miller and hoped that wherever he was, he knew that his death hadn't been in vain. that it had led to something meaningful, that his name was attached to a program that was helping countless people, that his legacy was one of healing and hope. She thought about all the students she had taught, all the colleagues she had mentored, all the lives she had touched both directly and indirectly. She had started out wanting to save individual lives. She had ended up helping to transform an entire field's approach to mental health and trauma. And she thought about herself, about the woman she had become. Not the fearless pilot she once was, but something better. Someone who knew fear intimately and chose courage anyway. Someone who had been broken and had learned that broken things could be mended, often becoming stronger in the places where they had cracked. Tracy smiled as she touched the memorial plaque one last time. She had come full circle, from tragedy to triumph, from failure to fulfillment, from brokenness to wholeness. She was Tracy Bennett. She had been a nurse pilot, a bus driver, a ground team paramedic, a teacher, an advocate, and a survivor. She had experienced the worst that life could offer, and had found a way not just to survive, but to thrive. She had turned her trauma into purpose, her pain into power, her failure into wisdom. And she had learned the most important lesson of all, that being a hero isn't about never failing or never being afraid. Being a hero is about failing, being afraid, and choosing to keep going anyway. It's about getting back up after being knocked down. It's about using your pain to help others. It's about being human, flawed and fallible, and still doing your best to make the world a little bit better. Tracy had done that. She was still doing that. And she would continue to do that for as long as she could, because that's what heroes do. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We'd love to hear what inspired you the most. And where in the world are you watching from? Let us know below.